Welcome again, guys. And so we're talking about self. As a teacher of self-knowledge, having studied in the tradition, when we're talking about self, you've got relative, and there's no superior or inferior. It's about basically you've got self, which is relative. Okay, lowercase s, small s, self, relative self, and then you've got the absolute self, which is non-relative. What we're talking about here is that self to which everything relates is not relative. You can't relate to it because it is oneself, it is you. So what we're talking about here is a mystery until someone points out the nature of self. We have no idea because we can't see ourselves. The seer cannot. You can't look at yourself. You can only see yourself in a mirror, but that's not who you are. You're not seeing anything. You can't see the seer in the mirror. So this has always required a different type of mirror. The mirror being the teacher. The teacher throughout the generations, one teaching has survived. One teaching, which is this teaching called self-knowledge, Atma Vidya. It comes right at the end of the Vedas as part of the Upanishads, the Veda Upanishads. And it's a tradition that's been ongoing generation upon generation, and it passed down from teacher to student, throughout all the generations of different ages and etc. Okay, let's just get back to the knowledge. Decoding the self is the title of this talk. So decoding means what? The only mystery in the universe is oneself. Okay? And if you weren't in the universe, would universe be a mystery? Would it even matter? If you aren't in the universe means nothing. It doesn't matter. So the only mystery in the whole creation, and what makes the whole creation a mystery, is our existence in it. Right? If we didn't exist in the creation's mystery wouldn't matter to us. Right? So the only mystery that really matters is the mystery of ourselves. And as long as we are a mystery to ourselves, because does anybody know what the destination of this whole journey is? Has anyone ever told us or pointed it out? Nobody. You've got all these scribes talking on social media about, life, etc. But no one's telling us what life is. What is it that we are existing in? We arrive here, we don't know what we are doing here, we don't know where we're going, where life is taking us, where it comes from. So to decode the mystery is very simple. It's been going on for generations. Teachers have been decoding this mystery of the human being by using one simple, tiny word. I. One word, right, is the password, if you like, or passcode to the universe. And that one word is responsible for the whole mystery, right? Calling myself I in something I don't know anything about, right? I land here in this creation. I find myself existing in a body. I know nothing about where it came from. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know where this body's going. I don't know where creation's going. I don't know. And nobody is telling us. Okay, so throughout the generations, one teaching has survived. Why? Because it tells us, it elaborates on the nature and meaning of this word I, it decodes this word I. So In other words, how come this I gets in question, right? Because what we do is we come into our existence and we don't know what we're doing here, but we say, I exist. I exist. Not knowing where existence is taking us, not knowing anything, right? And our experience is blind, right? Some people would be a little bit harsh, more harsh with that. Our existence is dumb. Because existing already, we are totally blind to our existence and we don't know. Nothing in our experience ever tells us the nature of what we are experiencing. We've been experiencing creation 24/7, 365. Anything in the experience ever told you what you're experiencing? Nothing ever will. Because that's the whole game that's going on here. Right? We can experience it with our five senses, but the experiencer and what is being experienced, there's no means of knowledge, right? So what happens is our education leaves a huge gaping hole in our lives. And that hole, as I've elaborated on earlier, is the size of what? It's the size of the universe, right? So as long as I, the word, is a mystery, and we are a mystery to ourselves, we suffer as a result. Right? All our trauma, drama, and suffering is because of one word. I. Anything else getting conflicted, anyone? Only one thing gets conflicted and creates all our conflict. This word I. So decoding this I, you get to the light of the self that is shining on all our relationships with everything. So our education, what it does is it introduces us to everything relative to ourselves, but the final education comes when we get introduced to the non-relative nature of ourselves, the self with a capital S, right? And looking everywhere, trying to find the completeness of the self. The completeness is already the one looking. So all of us running around trying to do what we can in the world, all we are doing is trying to find completeness. To complete a thought, we're trying to complete one thought, the thought of ourselves, I. And this has been going on generation after generation. We're not the first to try and do this. You know, every generation has been doing the same thing. So, trying to resolve this thought we have of ourselves. All right, and how do we do that? If we have to take this I, along with all our experiences, and put it in a jar, all right, wanting to analyze this I, where do we take it to? What laboratory do we take this thought, this jar, with all our experiences in, to? Who do we go to? You know? We can't go to any of the relative sciences because they deal with relativity. They deal with the objective universe, right? And that keeps changing all the time. That's the nature of the relative world that we live in. It keeps changing, right? So, to understand that I, which never changes, where do we go? We've got to go to a non-relative source of knowledge, which has always been the teacher and the teaching. So now please, we've had teachers and teachers and teachers coming out of every whatever, you know, and we've been getting in trouble with these teachers because they've been, most of the teachers who came to the West from India, from the East, came to get famous, came for all sorts of reasons, and got involved in all kinds of stuff. And so there's a book out now called The Guru Papers or something, talking about how gurus have fallen and all this kind of thing. And nobody wants gurus anymore. Can you blame us? No. Because these guys, you know, got into sort of all sorts of nefarious activities and who knows what, you know. And so, but now please ask yourself, you know, if there's one bad apple in the orchard, do you destroy the whole orchard? Even if there are like 50 bad apples, do you destroy the whole orchard and just forget about apples? No. Get rid of the bad apples, put them on the compost, and you keep going, you know. You don't destroy, you don't just suddenly give up on apples. The same with teachers. Everything we've learned in our lives, we've learned from somebody. How to tie our shoelaces, how to eat, use a knife and fork, how to spell our name, right? And how to drink, someone's introduced us to everything. Coca-Cola, someone first gave you your first Coca-Cola, you know. Someone introduces us to everything. And someone has to introduce us to ourselves. It's that simple, because what happens is, as we start growing up as kids, we naturally just superimpose all our ideas on something we know nothing about, the word I. So taking this I to be the meaning of our lives, you know, the eventual outcome is what? Crisis. It's inevitable. Because we're superimposing our ideas and beliefs on things, on something that we know absolutely nothing about. And of course the inevitable crisis of this I comes along, which is what I've got a course on Inside Timer called the gift in crisis. And this gift in crisis has always been ourselves. There is no other gift other than ourselves. And when we discover not relative self, the absolute self that we are, the self shining on all our relationships in the world, is always there. It's already arrived. We have already arrived. The destination and truth of everything has already arrived as ourselves. We just haven't recognized it yet, because we've been so lost in prioritizing our thought of ourselves. So making a thought number one priority, we forget the one using the thought, you know, and relating to everything in the world, which is ourselves. And that's natural. We take ourselves for granted. Getting lost in all our activities, the one enabling everything, ourselves, gets ignored, forgotten about. And that self is the self with capital S. Shines on all our activities. It's basically like Google to the internet. The Upanishads have always been, the Vedas have always been to the human being, right? So in the same way as the Google shines a huge light on all the information in the world, the Upanishads shine a huge light on the nature of existence and the nature of being human and the human being, right? Eventually resolving one tiny little thought, the thought I. And when it's no good, I was sharing yesterday something, some friend posted something where, you know, we can ask the question, who am I? And then by asking the question, we get rid of the questioner. That doesn't work, because the questioner still remains. The question still remains. I can never answer a question by asking the question. You know, if I'm lost in London and I'm running around saying, where am I, where am I, where am I? Will the question answer, will give me the answer. Where am I, where am I? I have to ask somebody, you know. And they then tell you, okay, you're on this street, you know, German street or Bond Street or whatever street, and from there I can make my way back to where I want to go, right, relatively. But when it comes to ourselves and asking the non-relative question of who am I, what we are really asking is, who is I? Who is I? So traveling through all of us, I is the original time traveler, and I've said that before. So I, traveling in all of us, is one and the same I. Who is this I that's been traveling timelessly through every generation? And the Upanishads, the Vedas, through this teaching called Atma Vidya, have been answering that question for us, for the human being. And now, as we look at the world at large and we see the chaos and confusion and conflict going on, there's only one thing that's conflicting and getting conflicted in everybody. I. If we're just observers watching everything and not happy with what's going on, getting conflicted in all of us is I. The ones fighting these battles and going crazy, who is fighting? It's I fighting I. Individuality fighting individuality, having superimposed all our own ideas on one thought, the thought of oneself, beliefs of all kinds, they just get all superimposed. This is what's fighting. So the battleground is one, I. So now to just decode this I, what happens? Peace. When is this I ever peaceful? In deep sleep, any conflict? In deep sleep, when you're like with yourself, right? Any conflict? Any beliefs, any ideas, any roles getting conflicted and confused in deep sleep? No, nothing. In deep sleep, this I gets suspended momentarily. Depending on how long we're in deep sleep, this I gets suspended, right? What happens then in the morning is first thing we get up and wake up and think, I am awake. And so what's waking up? I thought. That was asleep, now suddenly is waking up. But during deep sleep, all the roles, all the beliefs, no matter who we are, whether we are, all our nationalities, everything gets suspended. And what happens? We are absolutely peaceful, absolutely blissful. Why? Because we are with ourselves. Now what happens during the day is, the moment we wake up, that first thought that we wake up with in the morning is the I thought. So instead of waking up, all we're doing is falling asleep again in this thought. And there's nothing wrong with that. You can't blame the thought, okay? You can't. So the I thought is just doing its job, trying to resolve all our conflict for us. And it only resolves the conflict when it resolves itself, when it knows its source. And this has been what the teachings of the Upanishads, the Veda Upanishads, the self-knowledge teaching has been doing for generations, timelessly decoding this I, right? Because ultimately, I is the password, the PIN code, as I said earlier, to the mystery of the universe. For the mystery to be there, there has to be a secret. For any mystery to exist, first there has to be a secret. That we are the secret has never been pointed out or shown to us, right? And as long as we are still a secret to ourselves and a mystery to ourselves, we can never settle down, we can never be happy. This word happy, right? Anybody looking for unhappiness anywhere? No, the whole human race wants happiness. The mouse chasing the cheese, the dog chasing the mouse, the owner of the dog chasing the dog. From the time we wake up first thing in the morning, what we are doing is chasing that feeling that we experience during deep sleep, happiness, bliss. We look for it in every one of our relationships, right? But the mistake we make is looking for it in the relative world. So in the beginning of the talk, I just said, there's the relative self and there's the absolute self. So looking in the relative world for happiness is where we make the mistake. Because happiness is not relative. Happiness is oneself. And a lot of people have studied this, with meditation and philosophies and all that kind of thing, and everybody goes, happiness is inside me. It's not. Happiness is the very nature of who we are. It's not inside us, it is us. We are the bliss itself. We are the happiness itself, which is pointed out in the word in yoga, Sat Chit Anand. Ananda means happiness, bliss. Sat means, the word Sat means that which is constant, that which is unable to change, it cannot change, right? And Chit means Chaitanya, the consciousness, experience, what we are experiencing consciously. So waking up in the first thing in the morning, what happens? The sleeper that was asleep wakes up again to this thought, I. Now just analyze this waking up. Waking up is not an activity, right? Like going to sleep is not an action, it's not an activity. Sleep happens. Waking up is also not an activity. Waking up happens, right? You just wake up as though waking up, but consciousness doesn't wake up, okay? Consciousness is always constant, right? Sat never changes. So waking up, the I thought that was asleep, when the body was asleep, wakes up and says, oh, I'm awake. But before the I can wake up, you're already awake. You're already conscious, all right? All that's happened is that the body wakes up. The I thought, the ego, if you want to call it in Western terms, wakes up. In the traditional terms of yoga and the East, it's called ahamkar, the I maker, all right? And its job is to resolve all our conflict, all our thoughts, conflicting us, conflicting emotions, all this thing. That's all this ego is doing all day long, until it finally resolves itself. And it can't do this on its own. So asking the question, who am I, who am I, who am I? I'll never get the answer. So the questioner, ultimately one discovers, is the actual answer. But someone needs to point that out. Until you get someone to point it out, we don't know who is questioning. So by asking who am I, the questioner is still there, still not knowing the answer, right? It doesn't work. Who am I doesn't answer the question. But the reason the question comes around is because, as I said earlier in the talk, existing in creation, right? First of all, to ask the question, we have to all exist. First, we have to be present, right? Then we say, I exist, right? But not knowing what is existing. Then what happens? We project all our own ideas on this I and our existence and make our own beliefs, right? And then getting into crisis, we start looking for answers and looking for solutions, And the only time we do open up to questioning is when we get in crisis. And that's why crisis has always been the holiest, most sacred point in every human being's life, and treated as such in the tradition. Because in crisis, suddenly when the person was not open to asking questions, suddenly the mind opens up and I'm open to questioning. And I use the example of walking around in a big city, any city, right? Getting lost, looking for a restaurant, getting lost, right? What happens is you go round and round in circles looking for the address of this restaurant in a bad neighborhood maybe, and you start getting desperate and it's getting dark, you're getting late, right? Then what do? And what's getting conflicted and in crisis? One thing, I, right? Trying to resolve the thought of the restaurant, trying to get to the restaurant, right? All that we're doing is we're getting lost in a thought, right? So finally, when you get enough of it, and your battery of your GPS on your phone dies or something, then what do? You go to someone local. You say, look man, I'm trying to find this restaurant. Please tell me, where am I and what am I doing? Where is this place? And what normally happens, they point out that where you are looking is exactly where the restaurant is. You've been there all the time. You just couldn't see it. Same thing happens with ourselves. Getting in crisis is one thing, I, right? Going round and round, circling around, looking for the truth, in even looking for the truth of ourselves or looking for the solution, we deny ourselves. But what happens then? You go to someone local. Like in a city, you go to someone local, someone who knows the neighborhood. And then you say, who am I? And if they know, they help you and they point it out, because the teachings and the Atma Vidya teaching has been pointing this out for generations upon generations. And it requires a method. So this teaching is always to decode this I and find the light of truth and meaning of ourselves. We've always had to go to a teacher who understands the methodology, how to point out, because to point out that which is unrecognizable. How do you recognize the seer? The only way you can do that is by someone who has actually had it pointed out to them. And this is the job of the teacher and the teachings of self-knowledge. And basically, consciousness, please, is the most common thing there is. There's nothing but consciousness. So the self is that presence, consciousness, which is present in and through all our relationships, right? So to point it out, if consciousness is all there is, how difficult can it be? Easy. Consciousness is common. It's like pointing out water in the ocean. How common is water? Right? In and through all the waves, there's only just water. Right? So in the same way, you point out what is it that is that constant, that sat, which is in and through all our relationships, all our thoughts, all our emotions. Nothing but self, nothing but consciousness. And this is why the teaching has been so successful in solving and resolving this I. And so I is the light itself, shining in each of us. Self, capital S, shining on all our thoughts, all our emotions, is nothing but self, right? And when you delve deeper, what you do is you first of all start by analyzing what is the nature of happiness, anandam. Then, once you understand happiness, happiness is taking place in the presence of something, consciousness. And then you go from happiness to understanding consciousness, right? And then consciousness being common and normal and ordinary, you suddenly realize, oh my word, I've been conscious all my life. I just never knew it, I never realized it, right? Because why? Because we take our own existence and our own presence for granted. And then everybody starts telling us, no, 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 you must get involved in meditation and all these things and practices. And then what happens, we all get lost in the practices. All getting lost in one thing, ourselves. So understanding the nature of this I, understanding the nature of yourself, you understand the nature of the whole thing, you just decode the whole universe through one word, I. We share self-knowledge. That is our mission, our mandate. We've been told to share this teaching, which has been revived recently in India in the last 50 years and being taught in English. We use very little Sanskrit. Unless the concept doesn't exist in English, right? If the concept doesn't exist in English, we use Sanskrit terminology. But because the I doesn't matter, doesn't mind which language we use, right? There's only one tiny little word that we need to understand, I. And so to end off, I'll just do a little short meditation. So if you'd like, please close your eyes. And please notice, closing the eyes doesn't mark the beginning of presence. Already present, already conscious. There's nothing we have to do for us to be present. Already present, effortlessly, without doing a thing. Closing the eyes doesn't mark the beginning of meditation. It just brings us back to the body. It's like closing the curtains in the house. Just lessening the distraction. Already present is ourselves. Now, just listening to the sounds around you. Any sound will do. Notice how the sounds keep coming and going in silence. Already present. Silence you don't have to wait for. You have to wait for a sound to come and go in silence. You have to wait for a thought to come and go in consciousness. But you don't have to wait to be conscious. Already that constant in our lives, with or without doing a thing, being is absolutely effortless. Silence already there, already present. Regardless of how big a sound or loud, underneath, in between the sounds, is nothing but silence. Already present. No sound. No matter how big or how many, has ever affected the silence. so too, no thought, no matter how big, has ever affected consciousness. How old is silence? When did silence first begin? Beginningless, timeless. The same silence now is the same silence it's ever been. Like silence is unchanging, consciousness too. That presence in which everything is present never changes. Be the changeless that you already are, effortlessly, and enjoy all the changes. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. There is nothing but peace, changeless peace, nothing but bliss. Thank you for joining me, and look forward to seeing you next week this time.